The following audio is via a Skype call.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Howdy do, once again, Sue Rose Minahan. So glad to have all of you tuning in. We continue with Gemini this week. It's our second week, and Gemini is a changeable air quality, and it is that spirit to matter. Life in every form, all the cycles of astrology is changing from a continual form. In fact, last week, speaking about Gemini, I wanted to clarify one thing as I was researching and getting ready, understanding the concept for tonight, and that was about the stars with astronomy. The fact that the constellation, it's one of the winter constellations. In fact, as it leaves in May, it starts in February predominantly, and of course we must remember this is all from viewing on Earth. Astrology itself, like the stars, although related, but we're not talking really in astrology of astronomy, but it so relates. I mean, we really are. And so where you are on Earth is you view it differently. In other words, from some aspect on Earth, you can see the constellation of Gemini in the winter. And it departs at the last point somewhere around the solstice in June, trailing off. And the fact that I had said that they were seen differently, the two stars, Castor and Pollux, the twins. This is where it's all relating to. Well, one rises before the other depending on where you're at, but they're only 5 degrees different. They are the closest stars of all that we recognize. And one, going back to the mythology of it, because we are in Gemini, although our subject is going to take a leap, how to unify a strong dimension of ourself, because Gemini does relate, as I have said, between the spirit matter. And of the mythology, these two twins, these brothers, one was of Zeus, Pollux, and the other of the king of Sparta, of Castor. The mother had these twins of both. And their entire quest was to unify after Castor died, trying to connect. And so, to correct myself before, Pollux joins Castor. I mean, there's many themes of it, but I like this theme, and I think it is predominant. Castor, Pollux, the immortal, is able to join Castor in Hades, the underworld, and then return to Olympus, where the gods live. And in many ways, Hermes, or Mercury, who rules Gemini, is the one messenger that is able to go, sent by Zeus, to the underworld. Remember, all of this is symbolic, it's representational, it's a language told by ancients, because in order to define the world, how can you tell but what we can relate to, its experience? Today, we're bridging a new aspect of it with Lilith, a subject frequently undiscussed, and really, if you look at the mythology of it, for good reason that it is, but very relevant. We'll discuss that, and I have the pleasure of introducing our guest from Brunswick, Maine, Kathryn Zumstein, an evolutionary astrologer of Earth-Sky astrology, who consults, writes, teaching a course this fall in person and online. And of course, you can check Talk Cosmos and see our guests and click on her link, or go directly to Earth-Sky astrology to find out about it. Kathryn,
hello.
Oh, hi. Okay, go on. It's a hello.
Hi. Hi.
Well, we're talking about Lilith today. And in fact, you have Lilith in Gemini, and Lilith transiting right now in Capricorn happens to be in our event's third house. So it's relevant by every mean.
Yes. And I think just generally Lilith is a point and a reference that is very difficult to understand because it's so unique for each person. She sort of brings to us what we fear, but ultimately what liberates us when we embrace that which we fear. And right now, because she's conjunct Pluto, it's even more compelling right now. So jumping into the abyss isn't something we want to do. But like if we can think of any time we have taken a great leap, but it was something that was we couldn't make a decision about it. We had to do it. That's Lilith. And I think also she's subtle in ways as well. So it's kind of a shifting thing because there's so many things connected with Lilith, as we were talking this morning. The tree of life, the serpent, and the bird.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I think the beauty of it really shows in that mythology where Inanna, who's Venus of love, taking the tree of life out of the water, which you could say is of the emotion and all the symbolism, but plants it, and then part of that tree of life, unknown perhaps, but yet still, when you think of the part of love of Inanna, of Venus, is the serpent of change, of eternity, of regeneration, with the wisdom of such, and Lilith, who is of the primal goddess of the nature of the instinctive part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you say, it's so right, because those fears, Lilith has such a legacy, a mortal, in our thinking of, bad, and it's those projections, those fears.
I think she's also about the wise woman,
yes.
Who knows what we need and guides us to it. She doesn't push us, but she guides us there. And it's an aspect of the feminine that's kind of uncomfortable for a lot of people. We tend to think of, the moon and Venus as the feminine symbols. And this one's a little bit harsher. But only, the ultimate goal with Lilith is being whole and being complete and embracing all parts of ourselves.
I agree. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
I do agree, that wholeness. And when I was saying about, perhaps for the audience, I ought to clarify, it's not that Lilith really has fears, it's that people have rejected what she is and projected onto her what they fear within themselves. For the very fact that, as you're commenting, she is whole. And therefore, that sense of wanting equality.
Yeah, and I think also an important point is that Lilith has lessons for both men and women. This isn't just a female thing for females. And I think that's an important point as well, so that we don't project, it's like in the old, astrology, it would be said that for a man, his moon and Venus shows what type of woman he's attracted to, and for a woman, the sun and Mars and all of that, there is some truth to that, but we also have masculine and feminine within us, no matter what our gender. So that's kind of an important point.
Very, yes. Yes, it is. Because going back to the myth where Inanna, the young goddess, has chosen or decided that she's going to use this tree, cut it down and build a throne to glorify herself and then have a marriage. And then there's this relationship with this part of her, the wild part, the whole self, the part instinctive self of Lilith that re- rejects Adam because Adam wants to dominate and make, yes, the marriage according to his design.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm tying this in, generally with, as to connect with what you're saying about men and women, because it really relates, because how can we have any experience ultimately if we're not dealing on equal terms?
Absolutely. And I think it's also interesting that her orbit is very much connected with the moon and the moon's nodes. And the moon's nodes, as we know in evolutionary astrology, describe where we've come from and where we're going. And it's interesting that, the nodal cycle being around, 18 to 20 years. And Lilith, her cycle is 8 years and 10 months. So it's like half a nodal cycle. So in a sense, she's part of this whole direction of our karmic path, helping to, by not showing us what to do, but taking away the things we don't need that get in the way. It's kind of interesting how she's connected with the nodal path that way, which is connected with the earth and the moon.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Very much. Right. Thinking too of that tree with the roots in Gaia, which is the earth, and of the substance of her. Yes.
Right. So she's she's sort of like both spirit and matter. She sort of embodies both. And I think,
No, it is. In fact, Kelly Hunter, this book, because both of you are at UAC, and this wonderful event that in UAC, for those of you that are not astrologers, that's United Astrology Conference every 4, perhaps longer years that these groups meet, and they have a great book. They have wonderful lectures, and there was about Lilith and Kelly Hunter with her book, and I wrote it down exactly what she said here, which relates what you're saying. It says that Lilith is present in all filters that channel spirit into matter. Absolutely. And Gemini, hello, here we are too, because it's a matter of connecting. And if we can connect that communication, that integration, that's a great word that you brought up earlier. How to honor that, how to connect that integration.
And I think, it's also interesting that she represents the uncensored self, the part of us that needs to be authentic and real. And, as we grow, we learn to censor parts of ourselves. And she reconnects us with that we've, cut off. And
that's where the rage comes in, if there is rage. Just not acknowledging who we are, like she who left, rather than submit.
Right. And interestingly, how, that story of her being the first wife of Adam, who would not be, dominated. And so rather than be dominated, she went into exile. And I think that's what we do with the uncomfortable parts of ourselves. They go into exile, and we think they don't exist anymore, but they do. So, and that's the game she plays, is, bringing those parts of us out of exile.
Like you had said earlier, and I'm relating, dear audience, about conversations I've had with Kathryn, because we've really tried to work with this. It's a deep and complex part that isn't often talked about. But you keep bringing up the fact, and I love it, that Lilith, and I've read about it too, is the light that shines into the darkness. Because by going into exile, which is two stories, like it's been said, oh, she left Adam. Well, hello. I keep saying hello, but the factor is that if she couldn't be addressed as her authentic, true, whole self and seen as an equal. So those parts, when in exile, seem in the dark. It must be that, and that she wants to show the light.
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you so much for mentioning Kelly Hunter, because she, I sort of ran into her through my daughter at the conference, and I felt like I was being guided actually to meet her and also to read her wonderful book, which is called Living Lilith, 4 Dimensions of the Cosmic Feminine. So it's really very insightful and beautiful and deep.
In the very fact, I was realizing the 4 dimensions, like Chiron, Lilith really doesn't have one designation. And to me, that really demonstrates the complexity of this in our psyche.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. She is a star, an asteroid, in relationship to the moon. So it's many factors,
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's an important point to mention also. This summer, we're having a full lunar eclipse at the end of July. And what's important here also is, for many factors, one of which that, Mars is involved in this configuration, as well as Lilith. We have, the moon and, Mars retrograde there, as well as Lilith opposing the sun. And, Lilith will be at that sort of very last degree of Capricorn. And it feels to me that, this is another opportunity to let go of any wounding related to, the South Node in Aquarius, we don't feel that we're smart enough or we don't have everything we need to actualize, which is the sun in Leo, to be our true selves. And Lilith is going to bring all that shadow material up for clearing, because, it's at that last degree of Capricorn, just about to enter Aquarius, which is also, the Capricorn being about all our structures and everything we've, outsourced to authority figures. That's coming up for clearing as well, to become our own authority, basically. So I think that's kind of an important thing to mention, that configuration this summer.
Very good point. That commitment to ourself and actualization, because Mars wants actualization, and that in rage, which is, there's quite a process here when life has been suppressed, and not just life, but passion and emotion. We're talking about deep instinctual elements of our very self, and often relating to sexuality, as we know there's a current movement. And it's not, again, people about the feminist, it's about, it is that is a factor that is brought into the mundane world of validity. But essentially what we're driving at is equality between men and women, giving both strength to both. But the actualization through Mars, if with what you've wisely promoted here for us to consider, is how can we channel any anger or aggression or need or these instincts into something that is functioning.
Right. And of course, Beth, right now, again, because she's so close to Pluto, so many structures are going through an overhaul, so many things that we counted on and, as secure are not. And just dealing with that aspect, it's been pretty intense. And I think it's helpful to know that the new structures are something that we really need. And the old structures, they don't work so well anymore. And in an understanding that, I think, as we were mentioning earlier, understanding that we have inside of us everything we need, is an important point too, and learning the concept of interdependence with others, rather than codependence. I think that's a huge deal with Lilith too. It's like she's not going to accept anything but the whole self, and if we're in a situation or relationship where we're not taking complete responsibility for our feelings and we're putting that on somebody else, that's another situation where Lilith would come in and might take away that relationship where you're not being your authentic self within it.
It's fundamental. Fundamental, this idea that you're bringing forth about taking personal ownership. Ho'oponopono.
Right.
Hawaiian, that's the basis of it, is that we're all related. We don't know how far back our actions may have resulted, but we have the authority now to say, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, which is the premise, the very nutshell process of it. But it is that personal commitment, because otherwise this whole idea of projection, the external, we're trying to understand the external, but placing blame or placing guilt and all these other devious emotions, because it thwarts our action. How can you have control over something unless you have it within yourself? And
exactly.
Yeah, and I'm thinking it's all in Capricorn, so right now it's a heyday of getting the message.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, it's better actually but from a Capricornian standpoint, if you can own up to it and take the reins and go forward in some fashion that gets results, there's light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yes,
instead
exactly.
of always dwelling in one's misery about, oh gosh, and blaming. You always need a new audience for that, and that isn't inspiring.
Right. What's that saying? If you do what you've always done, you'll get what you always got, or something like that.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good reminder.
Right. And and I think also it's all being reinforced, and of course this is, we have Uranus just moving into Taurus as well, and actually I was noticing in early August, after that lunar eclipse, Uranus in August will be, squaring Lilith in early Aquarius. And I think there's something going on about this whole spirit matter, because Uranus being about, the mind, the higher mind, or maybe it's a matter, a mental matter split, mind, body. I think it's somehow we're being asked to embody that which our ideals and those things that we believe in, and so we need to. It's like there's some sort of upgrading in merging the two. We have to have a more enlightened relationship with our bodies,
Yes.
with the earth. Yes, and with the earth. I mean,
Yeah.
Taurus is an earth sign.
It's perfectly said, because, well, and it again, of course, relates to our Gemini conversation, spirit and matter. But this, another book by Lilith, by Chom, oh gosh, what's his last name? I'm sorry about that. But reminding that we're in this transition where people are recognizing we're really spirits. And our bodies, of course, have this language that knows such wisdom. And we tend to think, it's just like a clicker on a TV. Turn it to, dress it up different, be something different. But no, Taurus with Uranus, and I know for you folks that may not be astrologers, that's like, okay, more Greek. But the fact is, these are names, but it's a long transit. There's lots of time to get familiar, but it is that emphasis of unifying the body, and so somatic, right? I mean, the mind and the body, Gemini.
Right. And I think, part of our wounds stem from feeling it's this whole religious conditioning around the body being bad and the desire being bad, and our spirits are better and they're separate. That's that whole idea of separating the two, and all the guilt and the shame around having a body. I think that's going to be up for clearing as well.
Thank you. That is an absolute byproduct of it. That's exactly true. We have about 1 minute. I will just begin this at the moment to say that on Talk Cosmos at 6:30, which is Seattle time, of course, the lines are open for anybody that would like to call in. If you have comments or if you have questions about your chart, both Kathryn and I consult astrology, and so we'd be glad to give brief analysis, or not just analysis, but talk with you, empower yourself, really is the idea. And so that number will be 888-298-5569. And go on Talk Cosmos to see links, past archives. If you have a friend and they didn't get to hear this, you can listen to it again or share it. So that number is 888-298-5569. This is Kathryn Zumstein and Sue Rose Minahan on Talk Cosmos. And we'll be right back.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the period of Gemini. By leaving a cycle based on physical form, integrated through spirit, the energy of Gemini connects spirit with matter, focused on communicating and defining the external. Gemini is a mutable air sign signifying flexibility. Gemini dually focuses upon teaching and learning in order to synthesize the world one lives within.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick and proud aunt. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. 1 in 6. That little girl sitting alone at the playground, she can't play like the other kids. She doesn't have the energy because she's hungry. School lunch will be her only meal today. It breaks my heart that this is the reality in our country, but it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste. This food is then provided to families and children in need. Being a kid should be about using your imagination, learning, and having fun. These children shouldn't have to miss out on simply being a kid because they're hungry. To find out how you can help end childhood hunger in your community, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hello, this is Annie Hart, spiritual teacher, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk 1150 AM, where we discuss the meaningfulness of our roots in the stars.
Hi again. To Rose Minahan and Kathryn Zumstein on Talk Cosmos. That number, if you want to call in, is 888-298-5569. So if you have something about your chart or want to talk about Gemini, Lilith, we're happy to converse. Meanwhile, Kathryn and I will continue on. Hi, Kathryn.
Okay. Hello.
So the serpent, it really is misunderstood, isn't it? With this whole idea of the 3 primal, the serpent, the owl, and the tree of life in the roots of Gaia.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting with the snake is that it's the shedding of its skin, you know, and I think there's something about that, how, you know, periodically through life we have to shed our skin, so to speak, or some persona that no longer serves. And I think that's that transmuting power of the snake, you know, and that spiral motion of constantly evolving into something more real and authentic. That's the part of Lilith I find really, really interesting and compelling.
Okay, yes, the process of discovering, recognizing, listening to our natural whole self, as you're saying, we're saying, with the natural world, unafraid of those parts of ourself. What our bodies says.
And I think the it's sort of interesting because the bird, the symbol of the bird that lives in the tree of life is sort of our the all seeing. There's the birds fly all over and they see everything. And the tree is like rooted deep in the earth, just how Lilith is sort of rooted to the earth's gravity in a sense as well. The center of the earth, and then the snake sort of bridging that. It's sort of coiling up the root of the tree to the top, meeting the bird. So
yes,
it's really interesting symbolism.
It is. And Lilith made of the earth, the idea that she and Adam made of the earth. So it is. And right now, bringing back astrology, I'm looking at my notes. Venus is opposite in Cancer, which is so interesting because Lilith and Venus are Inanna because Inanna, for those that may not be realizing, many of the same ideas as the Venus, for instance, was called other names, referred to in the language of that culture. So in the Babylonian, Sumerian world, it was Inanna, but it is Venus, our planet goddess, and she's right opposite of Lilith. So it's really that awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and she's in Cancer, which is the sign of nurturing and loving of the home. And so her, in the coming few days, we've got her opposing Pluto, which is conjunct Lilith. So I think, a lot of very strong feelings in relationship, a lot of uncomfortableness in relationship can come out in this next few days.
Well, and as you say, all summer, these are big transitions. These are like pockets, like lightning might happen. And as it said, the vision is clear and then boom, it's dark, but you see it. So we've been starting and we are in it, and it's going to continue. This realization of where the structures aren't fitting. They aren't fitting with ourself. Just, as in the of the body. The body is going to be, starting with this Me Too movement, but
yes.
Eventually it'll be great to see how it relates with men of wisdom, men that recognize, which we know of many, who and because as we all have these parts, it's easily, described as women, but with the men too, because the parts, I was reading this in the book that was accepting the body as natural, honoring and trusting instinct, honoring our primal rawness, equality of relationship, masculine, feminine, passive, active, and willingness to leave situations that are unfair where your whole part can't work.
Yeah. And there's something liberating, I think, also, and like you were speaking about the Me Too movement, um, in a sense, when you call someone out for inappropriate behavior, or like in that situation, it's Jupiter and Scorpio, and Jupiter is about being free. It's about and in Scorpio, the sign of secrets, and there's sexuality in there too, and in vocalizing it, it's not only setting the women free by speaking out, in a sense, even though if maybe it isn't acknowledged by the the men who may have crossed boundaries inappropriately. At some level, it's freeing the secret. The secret is out, and now what do we do with it, and how do we handle it? But the first step is acknowledging an issue, and it crosses so many layers of life, socioeconomic layers. It's not confined to one area, so it's obviously it's an illness that exists, culturally, across cultures as well. So it's something that really needs to be acknowledged and dealt with, and I think appropriate boundaries in all areas are, is an issue that we have. And I think Capricorn as well, Pluto and Capricorn, Capricorn rules boundaries, and this is mine and that's yours, and it rules walls, it rules structure. So it's interesting that Jupiter and Pluto are in mutual reception. Jupiter's in Pluto's sign, Scorpio, and I'm sorry, that's not a mutual reception. I was thinking a few years ago of Saturn, Pluto, but Pluto also ruling the structure, and Pluto having, it's about our structure, our sexual Pluto structures. Capricorn, how do we the boundaries, the hierarchical boundaries, because a lot of these violations occurred within like the workplace or organizations where somebody had was higher up on the ladder, so to speak. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking of exactly of that, trying to tie in men and trying to tie in the Gemini thought, because thought is communication. It's in our environment, and the environment certainly is the workplace. I mean, it all kind of relates, but still, as far as men goes, it is that being dominant one over the other instead of the equality, just like the equinoxes of light. So in many ways, by being liberated, it gives such a great more pleasure of like a good sporting game, where people are out there just having fun going back and forth and learning, because essentially, isn't that really the best energy always? I mean, certainly there's work, but it doesn't mean it's grueling. That's become a byproduct by what your heart isn't in. But when your heart's in it and you're going through the process, yes, it takes time and effort, but it's that the joy is involved in it. It all interrelates back into that equality of communication, like friends, but I am thinking, I'm relating how, where it is that slave or just the workforce where you're not really, may as well be a serf or something of that sort. Same idea.
Yeah. And, being that, Pluto isn't in Capricorn that often, it clears through every sign it traverses. So we obviously have a few more years of a restructuring going on here. And so I think this Jupiter and Scorpio at the same time is actually very healing in many respects. And probably as Jupiter enters Sag, later this year, we'll be coming up with new ways of operating that are based on a higher principle of relating to each other
and talking Yes.
Yeah.
That whole, I'm reminded that either writing or talking, such as we're introducing this whole process of thinking, is really the start to starting to, learn how to negotiate, to even question or to wonder about oneself as an avenue of liberating, like you say.
Right, exactly. It's, Jupiter's the polarity of Sag and Gemini. So, part of what we're doing right now, because the sun's in Gemini. So, this is an important piece to just lay everything out. As we're evolving. I mean, when you think about it, the reason we're here is for our souls to evolve and to consciously. I mean, we all come from that womb of unconsciousness, and then we have to make this journey consciously, through lifetimes, and develop a relationship with ourselves, going through all these experiences, and know that within we are all divine, and our journey is about getting back. We'll get back to the source eventually, but how we do it? Can we do it consciously? Can we live authentically, as Lilith, is asking us to? That's the real key here.
Yes, to recognize in that what has been presented as a dual nature truly isn't, because there is this thought that in common reference that there's so many demons attached to her, but then she can be this goddess, consort of the god, as it's put. But really, I was recognizing that when she's a demon, it's only when people have, like A parenthesis, as an outline, that she's been externalized to being, because by rejecting her wholeness, people, and going into the unknown, people begin to fear it. Or if one begins to feel those passions, instead of thinking that they themselves are responsible for their passions, whether they're sexual or however, they get externalized. But then when, like in ancient times, when there were rituals that did involve bringing in the goddess, because fertility was a major necessity. Thoughts take a long time to go away. And the fact that we were so tied to the earth and needing rejuvenation, so then it was okay. So you're what you say about bringing up this divine self, our soul, testing the soul all the way. That's the message.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's interesting right now because, for the past year, we've had the North Node of the Moon in Leo. And, that's, until November, it moves into Cancer. So I think there's a big, I feel, a call for self-actualization. I mean, I felt it in myself for sure. And that really speaks to that Leo energy, how we express ourselves, how we, it's that fire energy, which is, and right now it's interestingly, other than Chiron, we don't really have any planets in fire. And that's an important piece, to be connected to play. Leo's about play as well, and remaining playful, and nurturing our creativity in whatever form that takes. That's an important piece right now, and especially with Uranus moving into this square to that Leo North Node. It's about thinking out of the box, and how we approach our creative lives.
Oh, I love that. That goes right along with this need that I said earlier about taking that Martian energy that you brought up with the upcoming eclipse to transmute it. So play with it. That's right. Which means play different to different people. It might be a little humor, it might be some sarcasm, it might be whatever, Right. But develop it, because, as it's been pointed out, the universe loves action. If you just begin with something or write it down or talk about it, you get more energy coming back to you rather than just sitting and sequestering it. And as they say, coming up with your demons of whatever, which isn't really ever. Lilith, I want to say, I think that was projected. But yes, self-actualization, absolutely. Perfect stepping stone.
Yeah. I mean, it's such an interesting mixture of symbols. I mean, because of course we haven't even mentioned it, but Saturn, which rules Capricorn, is currently in Capricorn as well. Along with Pluto and Lilith. So, it's almost like we have to go back to these old structures and really look at them to see why we're here, why
the history
now. Yes, exactly.
Right, the history, and the history is in the oral, because until Gilgamesh, the first written, with words in Sumerian. I mean, when we were in Chicago, a good friend brought a previous speaker here, June Trimbach, wanted to go see the museum of the Oriental Museum at the university, and there they had everything about Babylonia. I was thrilled. I got to really check it out. But looking at that history and with the ages, as we know, we're in the age. I mean, it was very relevant, and the ages too come to mind, where this is all astrological talk, of course, but it's another cycle. We're all in cycles. But 6,000 years ago, it was Taurus, which is about self-esteem. And when the patriarch started, and of course now we're progressing as it is towards Aquarius, not quite there, we think, although it's debatable, but but it is that equality of brotherhood, similar to what in the spirit form, spirit and body.
Yes. And, hopefully we can get to that enlightened place after 2,000 years in Pisces.
But you know what? I'm writing down a note again from Kelly Hunter in her book that we both have, and perhaps the rest of you will, which is about Lilith. And it says that because of her position with the whole goddess, the whole goddess of the heavens, of the earth, of the totality, and it speaks of our innermost desires and fears, but tempts us beyond what's safe, because as people started, it goes along with that whole business of Eve, who was manufactured to be the great wife. And it's not really a put down in that case, because it's evolutionary, as you're saying. It's a total soul process of consciousness and awareness, such as Venus across from us now is illuminating, and in Capricorn now that we're in, going back to our history, but looking at what were the stories that were told, and understanding that was the method of experience that was able to be expressed. But it is asking us to dive back into the void, which, understood or not, is that completion of wholeness. So
exactly. I mean, we can't really be whole until we've faced our void.
No, and it's so personal. That's the other code word that I've written down. Highly personal. It's not, which is, with all this thought process, it really becomes our own method.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that, the emotional body processes so much slower than the mental body. And, we may think we've come to a certain place, but, we have to honor our emotions. And sometimes, and it's a nonverbal place. And, there's no way through it except feeling it. And I think that's always a scary place for people too, because our emotions we can't explain them away. We can't make them, our mind may want to, feel that we resolved something, but we have to honor that grieving process, or of loss or whatever it is that we're feeling. And so I think that's an important point, especially I was thinking of that, especially with Venus and Cancer, opposing this Capricorn lineup. And of course we've got a grand trine right now with Venus and Cancer, Jupiter and Scorpio, Neptune and Pisces. So, good time to honor the emotional body here.
Yes, is jump in. The water might be cold, but yeah. This brings me up with the body, as you were mentioning. I was also reading about the hand, because Inanna, who is again Venus back in the ancients, was often used as a symbolic gesture that could greet, bless, or depending how approached or not, or worn as it was. And the idea, it was always the left hand. And it was, yes, and with the idea, there's a whole in the ideas of different hand gestures called mudras. But in Tibet, too, they have, it's called shag hand, which I don't know if all these details are necessary. But as I'm noticing it, the idea is, just like you were saying, that the body connotes so much more. It is that instinctual. Each sign builds on the next. I mean, we had to get our initiation from Aries and our vessel from Taurus, and now we're putting descriptions to it. But still, we have this body that has all this wisdom. And by pressing the hand, making an imprint, expressed, as it was said, a power encountered with the sacred. So yes, body language and hand, Gemini.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, interesting. Thank you for mentioning that.
And that, I think, is back in our great book. Yes, but it is very important. And women, again, I think as we're closing, not quite yet, but we're nearing the end of this delicious hour with you. It's men and women that struggle with these pressures of prescribed roles. And so it is a matter of liberating that self-awareness. I know I love the idea of equality. I revel in that.
Yes.
Well, we won't quite close, but I will announce, because we have about 4 minutes or something like that next week we'll continue Gemini for Talk Cosmos. Shannon Hayes, who is a Seattle evolutionary astrologer, will continue. And our focus thus far, as we have mentioned, concerning communication, is about the free press and how it connects us with our neighborhoods and creates our environment. So that'll be the stepping stone. It'll evolve into other ideas. And to remind people right now, you are listening to Talk Cosmos, and you can find us and our speakers online. You can find Kathryn Zumstein either at her web, which is Earth Sky Astrology, or if you get lost, just go to Talk Cosmos, because she'll be right there too.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Well, we have a few minutes here. We don't need to close. I just wanted to make sure that I got that out. Yes. So, because it is a very major concept of this equality between the two. Reminds me, thinking back of the other two archetypes, Aries and Taurus, which is Mars and Venus, that one great myth was when they did get together, they had harmonia. And it was brought up that Earth sits between Mars and Venus. And of course, these factors, and people might go, oh, more information, more details. What do I do with this? Just remember, it's symbolic. These are just descriptions of saying, it's like a little sauce on your curry, right? You have lots of condiments. So
yes.
By unifying, we could have But there's a process. It does involve repression, always involves emotion and recognition and awareness. And I think we'd be wise to know. So if we have, I think, according to my clock, we have a good minute and a half or 1 minute. Do you have something, dear Kathryn, that you would like to say?
Well, as we head into this kind of interesting period this summer with Mars pretty much on the south node all the way through, just remember to breathe.
Oh,
and
air.
It's gonna be some very intense energies. With Mars on the nodes always brings eruptions and ruptures, and it's important to give space for yourself, and not jump to quick conclusions, not jump into action without
information.
thinking. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, such a great Gemini concept, because we begin our life with air, we end it. So don't hold your breath too long.
Right, exactly.
Thanks. Okay. Bon voyage.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.
The preceding audio was via a Skype call.